Okay, you can see here I've got a stack of what would be called a migratory cover for a 5-frame box. This is what we're going to be building tonight. So this is just a standard migratory cover for a 5-frame box. It's not your inner cover, outer cover. A lot of people run a flat cover like this on Nook boxes or 5-frame boxes because they don't tend to run them as a long-term solution. I actually like to run a 5-frame colony. They're tall, narrow colony, but I enjoy running them because it's less footprint and I'm on limited space. But let me show you how we're going to build these tonight. You're going to need a couple of things. First off, you're going to need what I call your main lid board. This is 9 5/8 inches wide, 19 7/8 inches long. This is the right size, and if you just laid it flat on top of a 5-frame box, it would fit flush. Next thing you're going to need is 4 pieces cut 9 5/8 inches long by 1.5 inches wide by 3/4 inches deep. Doesn't have to be 3/4 inches deep. It doesn't have to be 1.5 inches wide. You can make it bigger if you want, but that's pretty standard dimension. Standard size for the scrap that I have. So you need 4 of those, and I'll show you in a bit. Lastly, and this is just me, maybe a few others, but something I really preach, you're going to need 2 9 5/8 by 3/8 by 3/4 shims and 2 18 3/8 by 3/8 by 3/4 shims. And this is for bee space. I'll explain that in a minute. But to create your standard product, you're going to stand up your main lid, and then I'm going to take 2 of what would be, these are what we call our end caps. I'm going to run a bead of glue along the front of the board here, right along your cut grain. Just square it up, kind of eyeball. It doesn't have to be perfect. And nail her good. This is your most critical component because the natural tendency of this board is to want to cup like this. And so by nailing this end cap on here, or the end piece we'll call it, this does not naturally want to bend at all. If you try to bend this down, I can't. Put in a vise, you can't bend it. So the natural twisting of wood is not going to bend it. So that's your most critical. So glue it and nail it tight, or staple it in this case. Do our other end. Flip it over, run a bead of glue. Line it up, nice and easy. Now something I'd like to reiterate is the angle of my gun. This is the bottom side of your lid. So when you're nailing, angle your gun, and this is exaggerated, but angle your gun ever so slightly towards the bottom side of your lid. That way, in the rare event that you do get a blowout nail, it's sticking out the bottom of your lid. It's not sticking out the top looking all sorts of ugly. Okay, so we've got our ends on. The next 2 pieces are what I would call your cap pieces. Now these serve to further reinforce, to resist the bending, twisting motion, but they also cover this gap that you nailed on here. So, you're going to paint this, but even still, you could possibly get rainwater down in that joint and it'll, expedite rotting. So we're going to put these cap pieces on top. So again, our glue here, Type Bond 2, waterproof, weatherproof glue. And I run a strip of glue along the top of the end piece and the top of the lid. Take your other 2 pieces that you have, I'll call these the cap pieces. Line them up so they're flush on top of your end piece, and then nail through the end and the lid. Again, these aren't as structurally important, so not as big of a deal. But I like to have them on there. Again, this is all scrap. A few misfires. Okay, got her nailed up nice and tight. Now, this is where most of what you would buy commercially, this is where they stop. But again, I don't like that because this, if you lay this flat on top of a box, you're going to have only 1/8 of an inch between the bottom of your lid and the top of the frames. That's a space that the bees can't get into, but the beetles can. If you're in the south and you're in the Gulf Coast and you have small hive beetle problems, proper space in your hive, proper bee space is very critical for the bees to be able to pursue those beetles and chase them out. So this is where my shims come in. Again, 2 shorter shims, 9 5/8 by 3/8 by 3/4, 18 3/8 by 3/8 by 3/4. Now, 1/4 inch is enough. They don't have to be a full 3/8 wide, but I cut them 3/8 because it's a little bit safer on the table saw. These are not structural, so I don't glue them in place, and I don't worry a whole lot about how pretty they are. Now, key thing here is change out your nails. I'm running 1.5 inch nails when I'm nailing together the end and the cap pieces. Switch over to a 1-inch nail because you're going through only a 3/8 into a 3/4. 1.5 will blow that out, but a 1 inch won't. So tack staple on either end just to hold it in place. Lay in your long ones. And on the long ones, I like to put a staple in the middle too, just because it's a little bit longer. Don't want it to warp. Be careful you don't nail your hand down. Okay, and we're done. So you can see now we've got this sort of tray sealing effect on the inside. Last thing you can do that I like to do, cut a 3-inch hole in the top with a hole saw, nail a number 8, number 6, sort of hardware cloth, not a number 4, the bees can get through a number 4. Nail the cloth on from the inside and you can put your feeder jar right on top of here and the bees can come up and eat. Again, that's good because they can get on top of the frames. If you just cut a hole in a standard flat cover, the bees can only eat from that feeder between the frames. But by letting them get up on top of the frame, they can get full access to that feeder. So with that, we're done. Now, normally when I'm building, I don't switch staples halfway through because that's time consuming. So typically I'll build my whole stack with just the standard industry style, and then I'll switch my staples, come back through, flip them all over, and nail on the shims. So again, the shims are optional to you. I highly recommend them. But you can see, especially if you're in the South, I recommend them. But you can see here's our 5-frame box. Take our lid, and this fits snug. We cut it just right, so yeah, maybe it fits too snug. There we go. Probably don't want to thump on it that hard when you got bees in here, so I'm going to have to probably stretch a few of these out, but my wife cut all these, so I credit her on making furniture-grade cuts on my bee boxes. I told her it wasn't that important, but she cut them perfect anyway. Anyway, throw that one in the stack. Once we get them all done, we'll be doing some painting. But just thought I'd show you guys that. Yeah, it's nothing all that difficult. Sometimes it just helps to see it done, so you know. Comment, rate, let me know what you think.